Sarah Martinez pressed her face against the cold glass of her apartment window, watching the rain streak down in twisted patterns. The phone call from 3 hours ago still echoed in her mind like a broken record. Maya was gone. Not dead, but something worse in many ways, taken by people who dealt in human lives like they were trading cards. The two women had been inseparable since their freshman year at college. While other friendships faded after graduation, theirs only grew stronger. Sarah became a social worker in Detroit, helping families navigate the system. Maya chose international aid work, spending months in refugee camps and disaster zones around the world. They called each other every week, no matter what time zone Maya found herself in. Last month, Maya had been assigned to a camp on the border between Syria and Turkey. The conditions were harsh, but she loved her work. Her last message to Sarah had been cheerful, talking about a little girl named Amira who had finally smiled after weeks of silence. Maya attached a photo of herself teaching children to play hopscotch in the dusty camp courtyard. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her smile was radiant despite the exhaustion in her eyes. Then, the messages stopped coming. Sarah knew something was wrong immediately. Maya never went more than 2 days without contact. When a week passed with nothing, Sarah started making calls. The aid organization Maya worked for gave her the runaround. First, they said Maya was in a remote area with no signal. Then, they claimed she was taking personal time. Finally, after Sarah threatened to contact every news outlet she could find, they admitted the truth. Maya had been kidnapped. The details were sketchy, but what Sarah learned made her blood run cold. A group of armed men had stormed the aid station at dawn. They took Maya and 3 other female workers. The organization believed it was a human trafficking ring that targeted Western women specifically. They could demand higher ransoms, or worse, sell them to buyers who paid premium prices for educated, attractive victims. Sarah's supervisor at the social services office found her crying in the supply closet that afternoon. Margaret Chin had been Sarah's boss for 5 years and knew her better than most people. She took one look at Sarah's red-rimmed eyes and closed the door behind her. "What happened?" Margaret asked gently. Sarah told her everything. Margaret listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When Sarah finished, Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "What are the authorities doing?" Margaret finally asked. "Nothing that matters," Sarah said bitterly. "The FBI says they're monitoring the situation. The State Department is working through diplomatic channels. Maya's organization hired some private security firm, but they basically admitted they have no idea where she is." Margaret sat down on a box of paper towels, making herself comfortable in the cramped space. "Sarah, I have to ask this. What are you thinking of doing?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah had been asking herself the same thing for hours. The logical part of her mind knew she should trust the professionals. She was a social worker from Michigan, not some action movie hero. She had no training in international rescue operations or dealing with criminals. But the other part of her mind, the part that remembered staying up all night with Maya during college when she had food poisoning, the part that remembered Maya flying across the country to be at Sarah's father's funeral, that part refused to accept sitting around and waiting. "I don't know," Sarah lied. Margaret studied her face carefully. "Sarah, promise me you won't do anything crazy. Maya needs you alive and free, not captured alongside her." Sarah nodded, but her heart wasn't in the promise. After Margaret left, Sarah sat alone in the supply closet for another hour, making plans she knew were probably impossible. That evening, Sarah spread everything she could find about Maya's disappearance across her kitchen table. News articles, emails from Maya's organization, maps of the region, photos from Maya's social media accounts. She studied each piece of information like she was preparing for the most important test of her life. The trafficking ring operated primarily out of a city called Gaziantep, about 40 miles from the Syrian border. It was a smuggling hub that had grown exponentially during the Syrian conflict. Desperate people paid thousands of dollars to be moved across borders, and criminal organizations had sprung up to meet that demand. Some of these groups had expanded their operations to include kidnapping and trafficking. According to the few news reports Sarah could find, the ring was run by a man named Kemal Osterk. He operated several legitimate businesses as cover, restaurants, import companies, a small hotel chain. But his real money came from moving people and goods that governments didn't want moved. Sarah's laptop screen glowed in the dark apartment as she researched flights to Turkey. She had about $8,000 in savings, enough to get there and survive for a few weeks if she was careful. She had no idea what she would do once she arrived, but sitting in Detroit while Maya suffered somewhere was not an option. Her phone rang at midnight. The caller ID showed her mother's number. Mom. Sarah, honey, I just had the strangest dream about you. You were on an airplane going somewhere dangerous. Please tell me you're not planning anything foolish. Sarah's mother had always claimed to have psychic intuition, though Sarah usually dismissed it as coincidence. This time, the accuracy was unsettling. I'm Fina, Mom. Just having trouble sleeping. This is about Maya, isn't it? Margaret called me. She's worried about you. Sarah closed her eyes. Of course Margaret had called. She cared about Sarah like a daughter and wasn't about to let her walk into danger without a fight. Maya is my best friend, Sarah said quietly. If someone took you, I'd move heaven and earth to find you. This is no different. But I'm your mother. That's different. Not to me. Her mother was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Your father always said you got his stubborn streak. Once you set your mind on something, there was no talking you out of it. Sarah smiled despite everything. Her father had died 3 years ago from cancer, but his influence on her personality was undeniable. He had taught her to stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. Maya was definitely in that category right now. If I can't talk you out of this, her mother continued, then at least promise me you'll be smart about it. Don't go in like some cowboy. Get help. What kind of help? I don't know. But you work with people every day who know how to navigate impossible situations. Use those connections. After hanging up, Sarah sat staring at her laptop screen. Her mother's advice was sound, but who could she possibly ask for help with something like this? She worked with families dealing with poverty, addiction, and domestic violence. None of her contacts had experience with international kidnapping rings. Then, she remembered Carlos Mendoza. Carlos was a former client whose daughter she had helped place in a safe home after his ex-wife's boyfriend had been abusing the girl. During the process, Carlos had mentioned his military background. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan with Army Special Forces before being medically discharged after an IED explosion damaged his hearing. Sarah had kept in touch with Carlos over the years, checking on his daughter's progress and occasionally meeting for coffee. He had always been grateful for her help and had mentioned several times that he owed her a debt he could never repay. She found his number in her phone and hesitated. It was past midnight, but Carlos worked night security at a warehouse. He would be awake. Sarah, is everything okay? Carlos answered on the second ring. Carlos, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you still have contact from your military days? People who might be able to help with a dangerous situation overseas. What kind of dangerous situation? Sarah explained about Maya, keeping her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. Carlos listened without interrupting, just like Margaret had earlier. Sarah, what you're talking about is extremely dangerous. These trafficking rings don't hesitate to kill people who interfere with their business. I know that. Do you? Because knowing it intellectually and understanding it in your gut are 2 different things. I've seen what these people are capable of. Then, help me do this right. Carlos was quiet for so long that Sarah wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke. There's a guy I served with, Marcus Reed. He got out of the Army about the same time I did, but he went into private security, the kind of work that takes him to places where governments can't or won't go. Is he good? The best I've ever seen. But, Sarah, his services don't come cheap. And he's not going to risk his life for a stranger. I have money. Not a lot, but some. And Maya isn't a stranger to me. It's not about the money, though that's part of it. Marcus only takes jobs where he believes he can succeed. If he thinks it's a suicide mission, he'll walk away no matter how much you offer. Sarah felt a flutter of hope for the first time in days. Will you call him? I'll do better than that. He lives about 2 hours north of Detroit. I'll drive up there tomorrow and talk to him face to face. This isn't the kind of conversation you have over the phone. Carlos, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Your friend Maya has helped people all over the world. Someone needs to help her now. After they hung up, Sarah felt some of the weight lift from her shoulders. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Carlos was right that she had no business trying to rescue Maya by herself. But with professional help, maybe there was a chance. She spent the rest of the night researching everything she could about Marcus Reed. His name appeared in a few news articles about military contractors and private security operations. The articles were vague about details, but they painted a picture of someone who specialized in getting people out of impossible situations. One article from 2 years ago caught her attention. Marcus had apparently helped evacuate a group of American journalists from Somalia when their government contacts failed to secure their release. The operation had been successful with no casualties, but Marcus himself refused to be interviewed about the details. Sarah found a few photos of him online. He was probably in his late 30s, with the kind of lean, alert look that suggested someone who stayed in excellent physical condition. His eyes held the same watchful quality she had noticed in Carlos and other veterans she had worked with over the years. By dawn, Sarah had made her decision completely. She was going to Turkey, with or without professional help. But if Marcus Reed was half as good as Carlos claimed, she would much rather have him on her side. She called in sick to work and spent the morning making practical preparations. She applied for an emergency passport renewal, claiming she needed to travel for a family emergency. She researched what documents she would need to enter Turkey. She even started learning basic Turkish phrases, though she doubted a few hours of study would make much difference. Carlos called her at noon. I talked to Marcus. He wants to meet you. What did you tell him? Everything you told me. He's interested, but he wants to assess the situation for himself before making any commitments. When? Tonight, if he can make it. He's driving down from Traverse City. We'll meet at that diner on 8 Mile Road, the one next to the auto parts store. Carlos, what's he like? Serious. Professional. He doesn't waste time on small talk, and he doesn't sugarcoat bad news. But if anyone can help your friend, it's him. Sarah spent the afternoon in a state of nervous energy. She cleaned her apartment twice, organized her work files, and even did laundry, as if completing mundane tasks would somehow improve her chances of success that evening. At 6 o'clock, she drove to the diner Carlos had mentioned. It was the kind of place that served coffee strong enough to wake the dead and pie that tasted like someone's grandmother had made it. She found Carlos in a booth near the back, sitting across from a man who could only be Marcus Reed. He was smaller than she had expected from the photos, maybe 5'10" and compact rather than bulky. But there was something about the way he held himself that suggested coiled strength. His handshake was firm without being aggressive, and his eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her feel like he was reading her thoughts. Carlos tells me your friend was taken by a trafficking ring near the Turkish border, Marcus said without preamble. Tell me everything you know. Sarah repeated the story again, this time including every detail she could remember. Marcus asked occasional questions, mostly about timing and the specific location where Maya had been taken. He made notes in a small notebook, his handwriting neat and precise. When Sarah finished, Marcus closed the notebook and studied her for a long moment. What makes you think you can help with this? He asked. The question was direct and challenging, but not unkind. Sarah had been expecting it. I don't think I can help with the actual rescue, she said honestly. But I know Maya better than anyone else. I know how she thinks, how she reacts under pressure. And I'm not going to sit in Detroit while she's suffering somewhere. Noble sentiments. But this isn't about nobility. It's about survival. Yours and hers. I understand that. Do you? Because if we do this, there's a good chance we'll both end up dead or captured. These people don't hesitate to torture information out of prisoners. They don't care about American citizenship or international law. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Maya has spent her entire adult life helping people in dangerous places. She's risked her safety over and over again for strangers. I'm not going to abandon her now. Marcus nodded slowly. Carlos said you were stubborn. I prefer determined. Fair enough. Marcus opened his notebook again and consulted his notes. Here's what I can tell you. The organization that took your friend operates out of Gaziantep, like you suspected. But they move their captives frequently to avoid detection. Your friend could be anywhere within a 100-mile radius of that city. How do we find her? Very carefully, and with a lot of luck. Marcus looked up from his notes. This isn't going to be cheap, and it's not going to be easy. I'll need $50,000 up front, plus expenses. And even then, I can't guarantee success. Sarah's heart sank. $50,000 was more than 6 times what she had in savings. I don't have that kind of money. Then we need to find someone who does, or we need to find another way to finance this operation. Carlos leaned forward. What about crowdfunding? People do that for medical expenses and stuff like that. Marcus shook his head. Too public. The last thing we want is media attention. These guys watch the news too. If they know someone is actively looking for the captives, they might decide to cut their losses. Sarah felt tears building behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. There has to be something we can do. There might be, Marcus said slowly, but you're not going to like it. Tell me. Maya's aid organization has insurance for exactly this kind of situation. Kidnap and ransom coverage. They can afford to pay for a professional rescue operation. They already hired someone. They told me they're handling it. They hired a security firm to investigate and potentially negotiate a ransom. That's not the same thing as a rescue operation. Most of these firms prefer to pay money rather than risk lives. Sarah felt a spark of hope. So what do? We convince them that their current approach isn't working. And we convince them that I'm a better option than whoever they hired. Marcus explained his plan over the next hour. It was complex and would require perfect timing, but it was possible. Sarah would contact Maya's organization and demand a meeting with their security team. She would present evidence that their current approach was failing and argue for a more aggressive strategy. Meanwhile, Marcus would use his contacts to gather intelligence about the trafficking ring's operations. He had worked with Kurdish militias in the region and maintained relationships with people who could provide information about criminal activities near the border. How long will this take? Sarah asked. If everything goes perfectly, 2 weeks to gather intelligence and plan the operation. Another week to execute it. And if everything doesn't go perfectly, Marcus's expression was grim. Then Maya might not survive long enough for us to find her. Sarah sat in the sterile conference room of Global Aid International's headquarters in Washington, D.C., trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Across the mahogany table sat 3 men in expensive suits who looked like they would rather be anywhere else. The organization's security coordinator, James Wright, shuffled through a stack of papers with the enthusiasm of someone reading tax documents. Ms. Martinez, I appreciate your concern for MS Patel, but I assure you that we have the situation under control, Wright said without looking up from his files. Our security consultants are highly experienced in these matters. With respect, Mr. Wright, it's been 3 weeks since Maya was taken, and your consultants don't seem to have accomplished anything, Sarah replied. I haven't heard of any progress, any leads, any communication with her captors. Nothing. Wright finally looked up, his expression carefully neutral. These situations require patience. Rushing into action often makes things worse for the hostages. Sarah had rehearsed this moment with Marcus for hours, but sitting here in this polished room felt surreal. The men across from her dealt with international crises as their daily routine, while she helped families navigate food stamp applications and custody disputes. Yet she was about to challenge their professional judgment based on the advice of a former soldier she had met 3 days ago. Mr. Wright, I've brought someone I'd like you to meet, Sarah said, opening her laptop. Marcus Reed has extensive experience with rescue operations in exactly this type of situation. Marcus appeared on the video call screen, sitting in what looked like a hotel room. He had insisted on joining the meeting remotely, claiming that his physical presence might intimidate the aid organization's executives into a defensive position. Gentlemen, Marcus said, his voice clear through the laptop speakers. I've reviewed the information Ms. Martinez has shared about your current security approach. I believe you're making a fundamental mistake. The three executives exchanged glances. Wright leaned forward slightly. And what mistake would that be, Mr. Reed? You're treating this as a ransom situation when it's actually a trafficking operation. The group that took Ms. Patel doesn't want money from you. They want to sell her to buyers who pay premium prices for educated Western women. The room fell silent. Sarah watched the executives' faces carefully, looking for any sign that this information was new to them. Wright cleared his throat. Our consultants have considered that possibility, but we believe ransom is still the most likely motive. Based on what evidence? Marcus asked. The group has a history of successful ransom negotiations. That's correct. But their ransom operations target wealthy businessmen and government officials. Aid workers are typically moved through trafficking channels because they have less financial value and more market value. Sarah saw one of the other executives, a younger man named David Chun, scribbling notes frantically. He looked up from his notepad with a troubled expression. Mr. Reed, if you're correct about this, what does that mean for Maya's situation? It means time is running out much faster than you think. Trafficking victims are usually moved out of the immediate area within the first week. By now, Ms. Patel could be anywhere from Istanbul to Dubai to Morocco. The longer you wait to act, the smaller the chance of recovery becomes. Wright's carefully controlled demeanor cracked slightly. Mr. Reed, I appreciate your concern, but Global Aid International has protocols for these situations. We work with established security firms that understand the legal and diplomatic complexities involved. How many successful recoveries has your current firm completed in similar trafficking cases? Marcus asked. The question hung in the air for several seconds before Wright answered. That information is confidential. I'll take that as 0, Marcus said. I've completed 7 successful recovery operations involving trafficking victims in the Middle East over the past 4 years. My success rate is 100% for cases where I'm engaged within the first month of capture. Sarah felt her heart racing. Marcus had never mentioned specific statistics before, and she wondered if he was being completely truthful or engaging in strategic exaggeration. David Shin spoke up again. Mr. Reed, what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing a targeted rescue operation rather than waiting for ransom demands that may never come. I have contacts in the region who can provide intelligence about the trafficking network. I can locate Ms. Patel and extract her safely. And the cost? Wright asked. $50,000 plus expense. Guaranteed results within 2 weeks, or you pay nothing. Sarah held her breath. This was the moment everything would either come together or fall apart completely. Wright consulted with the other executives in whispered conversation before responding. Mr. Reed, we'll need to discuss this with our board and our current security consultants. We can't make a decision of this magnitude immediately. Mr. Wright, Sarah interjected, Maya is my best friend. I'm going to Turkey to look for her, whether you hire Mr. Reed or not. I'd rather go with professional help than attempt this alone. The room fell silent again. Sarah knew she was playing her only remaining card, but she meant every word. She had already booked a flight to Istanbul for the following week. David Chun looked alarmed. Ms. Martinez, I strongly advise against taking any independent action. You could endanger both yourself and Ms. Patel. Then, give me an alternative, Sarah said. Show me that your current approach is actually accomplishing something. Wright opened a file folder and extracted several photographs. Our consultants have identified the compound where we believe the hostages are being held. They're conducting surveillance and planning a coordinated response with local authorities. Marcus's voice came through the laptop speakers with a hint of skepticism. May I see those photographs? Wright hesitated, then turned the laptop screen toward the photos. Marcus studied them for several minutes before responding. Those photos show a safe house that was abandoned 6 months ago. I recognized the building from a previous operation. If your consultants think the hostages are being held there, they're following outdated intelligence. Sarah watched the color drain from Wright's face. David Shin stopped taking notes and stared at the laptop screen. How can you be certain? Wright asked. Because I helped raid that building last year while working with Kurdish forces to break up a different trafficking ring. It's been empty ever since. The conference room erupted in whispered conversations between the executives. Sarah could hear fragments of phrases like complete failure and board will want answers. After several minutes, Wright called for quiet. Mr. Reed, assuming you're correct about our current intelligence, how quickly could you begin operations? I could be in Turkey within 48 hours. I already have a team standing by. What kind of team? David Shin asked. Local assets who understand the region and the criminal networks. Former military personnel with relevant experience. Medical support in case the hostages require treatment. Sarah felt a surge of hope. Marcus sounded completely confident, as if he rescued kidnapping victims every week. Wright consulted with his colleagues again before making his decision. Mr. Reed, we're prepared to authorize your operation under the following conditions. You will coordinate with our existing consultants to share intelligence and avoid conflicting activities. You will provide daily updates on your progress. And Ms. Martinez will remain in the United States during the operation. Absolutely not, Sarah said immediately. I'm going with him. Ms. Martinez, that's not negotiable. You have no training for this type of operation, and your presence would compromise the mission. Sarah looked at Marcus on the laptop screen. His expression was unreadable, giving her no indication of what he was thinking. Mr. Reed, Sarah said, what's your professional opinion? Would my presence compromise the mission? Marcus was quiet for a long moment before answering. Ms. Martinez, this operation will be extremely dangerous. There's a significant chance that some or all of the team members won't come back alive. I understand that, do you? Because understanding it intellectually and being prepared for the reality are different things. Have you ever been shot at? Have you ever seen someone die violently? Have you ever had to make life or death decisions in seconds while people are screaming and explosions are going off around you? Sarah's mouth felt dry, but she forced herself to answer honestly. No, but Maya is worth the risk to me. She might not be worth the risk to the other team members. If you panic or freeze up at a critical moment, you could get everyone killed. The brutal honesty of his words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She had been so focused on her determination to help Maya that she hadn't fully considered how her inexperience might endanger others. However, Marcus continued, there are ways to minimize that risk while still allowing you to participate. You wouldn't be part of the actual rescue operation, but you could provide support functions. Intelligence gathering, communication, liaison with local authorities. Wright looked unhappy with his compromise, but David nodded thoughtfully. What kind of intelligence gathering? Ms. Martinez knows Ms. Patel better than anyone else. She might recognize behavioral patterns or personal details that help us locate and identify her. She could also help with psychological support once we recover Ms. Patel. Sarah felt a wave of gratitude toward Marcus for finding a way to include her without completely dismissing the safety concerns. There's one more condition, Wright said. If this operation fails, Global Aid International will disavow any knowledge of your actions. We can't afford to have an unauthorized rescue attempt linked to our organization. Understood, Marcus replied. Standard terms for this type of contract. Then, we have an agreement, Wright said, though he looked like he was agreeing to his own execution. David will handle the paperwork and financial arrangements. After the video call ended, Sarah remained in the conference room with the three executives while they discussed logistics. David Chun would transfer the money to Marcus within 24 hours. Wright would provide Marcus with all available intelligence about Maya's situation, including the contact information for their current security consultants. Ms. Martinez, Wright said as they prepared to leave, I hope you understand the gravity of what you're undertaking. These people have no moral boundaries. They will torture you for information, and they will kill you without hesitation if they perceive you as a threat. Understand, Sarah said, but Maya has dedicated her life to helping people who have no one else to help them. Now she's the one who needs help, and I'm not going to abandon her. That evening, Sarah sat in her hotel room near Dulles Airport, making final preparations for her flight to Istanbul. Marcus had sent her a detailed list of items to bring and items to leave behind. No jewelry, no expensive electronics, no clothing that would identify her as an American tourist. Her phone rang. It was her mother. "Sarah, please tell me you've changed your mind about this insane plan." "I can't do that, Mom. You know I can't. Your father wouldn't want you to throw your life away on something like this." Sarah paused in her packing. "Mom, do you remember when I was 8 and that little boy Timothy fell through the ice on Miller's Pond?" "Of course I remember. You nearly drowned trying to pull him out. Dad didn't punish me for that. He said I did the right thing, even though it was dangerous. He said that's what people do for each other when it matters." Her mother was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "Promise me you'll come home safe." "I promise I'll do everything I can to come home safe. With Maya. Call me every day." "I will." After hanging up, Sarah finished packing and reviewed the intelligence files Marcus had sent her. The trafficking ring operated out of several locations around Gaziantep, but their primary holding facility was believed to be a warehouse complex about 20 miles from the city center. The facility was heavily guarded and surrounded by fencing, but Marcus believed it could be penetrated with the right approach. The plan was straightforward in concept, but complex in execution. Marcus and his team would conduct surveillance to confirm Maya's location and identify the best approach route. They would disable the security systems and neutralize the guards without raising alarm. Sarah would remain in communication from a safe distance, providing any insights about Maya's likely behavior and condition. If everything went according to plan, they would extract Maya and the other hostages and transport them to a safe location where medical personnel would evaluate their condition. From there, they would coordinate with Turkish authorities and the American embassy to arrange safe passage home. If things went wrong, Sarah tried not to think about that possibility. Her flight departed at 6 the next morning. Sarah had never been to Turkey, and under different circumstances, she might have been excited about visiting a new country. Instead, she felt nothing but nervous anticipation and a growing sense of unreality about what she was attempting. During the long flight to Istanbul, Sarah reviewed everything she knew about Maya's personality and habits. Her friend was strong and resourceful, but she had never been in a situation like this. How would she react to captivity? Would she try to escape or cooperate with her captors? Would she be injured or traumatized beyond recognition? Sarah also thought about her own motivations. Was she really doing this to help Maya? Or was she trying to prove something to herself? The distinction seemed important, though she wasn't entirely sure why. When the plane landed in Istanbul, Sarah felt like she was stepping into a different world. The airport was modern and efficient, but the signs in Turkish and Arabic reminded her that she was far from home. She collected her luggage and made her way through customs, trying to project the calm confidence of an ordinary tourist. Marcus had arranged to meet her at a hotel near the airport. She found him in the lobby, reading a Turkish newspaper and drinking coffee. He looked completely at ease, as if he visited Istanbul regularly for vacation rather than rescue operations. "Any problems with customs?" he asked as they shook hands. "None. They barely looked at my passport." "Good. We'll stay here tonight and drive to Gaziantep in the morning. It's about an 8-hour trip, so we'll want to start early." Marcus led her to a quiet corner of the lobby where they could talk without being overheard. He opened a folder containing maps and photographs. "I've been in contact with my local assets. They've confirmed that the trafficking ring is still operating out of the warehouse complex, but they've upgraded their security significantly in recent weeks. Motion detectors, additional guards, new fencing. Is that because of Maya? Possibly. Or they might have had problems with other rescue attempts. Either way, it makes our job more difficult." Marcus showed her aerial photographs of the target location. The warehouse complex consisted of 3 large buildings surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Guard towers sat at each corner of the perimeter, and several patrol vehicles were visible in the parking area. "It looks like a prison," Sarah said. "That's essentially what it is. The question is whether we can get in and out without triggering their defensive measures." "How many people do you think are being held there?" "Based on the intelligence we have, probably 15 to 20 victims at any given time." They move people through the facility regularly, so the population changes constantly. Sarah studied the photographs, tried to imagine Maya somewhere inside those buildings. The thought of her friend being held in such a place made her feel sick. "Marcus, are you sure we could do this?" He looked at her seriously. "Sarah, I'm not sure of anything. This operation has about a 60% chance of success under ideal conditions. But ideal conditions don't exist in situations like this. What happens if we fail? If we're caught, we'll probably be killed. If we escape but fail to recover the hostages, they'll likely be moved to a more secure location where recovery becomes nearly impossible." Sarah absorbed this information in silence. 60% odds seemed terrifyingly low when Maya's life hung in the balance. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "I mean, $50,000 is a lot of money, but it can't be worth risking your life." Marcus folded the maps and returned them to the folder. "I've spent most of my adult life in places where bad people do terrible things to innocent victims. Most of the time, there's nothing I can do about it except try to complete my mission and get home alive." He paused, looking out the lobby windows at the Istanbul skyline. "But every once in a while, I get a chance to actually help someone who deserves help. Your friend Maya has spent years helping people who can't help themselves. Now she needs help, and I have the skills to provide it. That's a better reason than money. Money pays the bills, but it doesn't get you through the hard parts when everything goes wrong." That evening, Marcus introduced Sarah to two members of his local team. Ahmet was a former Turkish Special Forces soldier who now worked as a security consultant for international businesses. Kemal was a Kurdish militia member who had extensive knowledge of criminal networks in the border region. Both men spoke excellent English and treated Sarah with respectful professionalism, but she could see the skepticism in their eyes. They were clearly wondering why Marcus had brought an untrained civilian into such a dangerous operation. "Sarah will be our liaison with the hostage," Marcus explained. "She knows Maya Patel better than anyone else and can help us identify her quickly when we locate the hostages." Ahmet nodded politely, but Kemal looked more dubious. "What if she panics during the operation?" he asked in accented English. "Sarah won't be participating in the actual assault," Marcus said. "She'll remain at our command post and provide support through communications. And if something goes wrong with the assault team?" Kemal pidesit. "If we need emergency support or extraction?" Marcus met his gaze steadily. "Then, Sarah follows the same protocols as any other team member. She either helps with the solution or she stays out of the way." Sarah felt the weight of their expectations and doubts. These men were risking their lives based on Marcus's judgment, and his judgment included bringing her along. She was determined not to prove their skepticism justified. "I won't let you down," she said simply. Kemal studied her for a moment, then nodded. "We will see." They spent the rest of the evening reviewing the operational plan in detail. The assault would take place in 3 phases. First, Kemal would disable the warehouse's power grid and communication systems. Second, Ahmet and Marcus would neutralize the guards and breach the buildings. Third, they would locate and extract the hostages while Sarah coordinated communications and prepare to guide Maya through the psychological challenges of sudden rescue. "Most trafficking victims are traumatized and disoriented," Marcus explained. "They often don't trust their rescuers initially. Having a familiar face and voice can make the difference between a successful extraction and a hostage who panics and runs." The plan sounded logical and professional, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were all pretending to have more control over the situation than was actually possible. Too many things could go wrong. Guard could be more alert than expected. The hostages could be moved before they arrived. Equipment could malfunction at critical moments. But Maya was depending on them, and sitting safely in Michigan while her friend suffered was not an option. Sarah would rather fail while trying than succeed at doing nothing. As they prepared to leave Istanbul the next morning, Sarah sent what might be her last message to her mother. She kept it simple and optimistic, promising to call as soon as the operation was complete. She didn't mention the possibility that the operation might end with her capture or death. The drive to Gaziantep would take them through some of the most beautiful countryside in Turkey, but Sarah doubted she would be able to appreciate the scenery. Her mind would be focused entirely on the friend who was waiting somewhere ahead of them, probably wondering if anyone was coming to help her. Maya had always been the brave one in their friendship, the one who traveled to dangerous places and helped people in desperate situations. Now it was Sarah's turn to be brave, and she prayed she would prove worthy of her friend's example. The warehouse district outside Gaziantep looked like something from a post-apocalyptic movie. Industrial buildings stretched across the dusty landscape, connected by cracked roads and surrounded by chain-link fences. Sarah crouched behind a concrete barrier about half a mile from their target, watching Marcus and his team through military-grade binoculars. 3 days of surveillance had confirmed their worst fears. The trafficking operation was larger and more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. The warehouse complex held at least 30 hostages, not the 15 to 20 they had originally estimated. The guards carried automatic weapons and followed military-style patrol patterns that changed every few hours. They're not just criminals, Ahmet had observed during their second day of watching. Someone with serious military training is running their security. Sarah adjusted the binoculars and focused on the main warehouse building. Somewhere inside that concrete structure, Maya was probably wondering if anyone was coming to help her. The thought made Sarah's chest tight with anxiety and determination. Contact in 5 minutes. Marcus's voice crackled through her earpiece. Sarah, confirm communications check. I hear you clearly, Sarah whispered back, even though she was far enough from the warehouse that normal conversation wouldn't carry. All frequencies are clear. Roger. Remember, once we go active, maintain radio silence unless it's an emergency. We don't know if they have equipment to intercept our communications. Sarah had spent the past 3 days learning to use the team's communication system and studying detailed floor plans of the warehouse buildings. Marcus had been patient with her questions, but she could tell he was concerned about her ability to handle the stress of the actual operation. The plan had evolved significantly since their arrival in Gaziantep. Originally, they had hoped to conduct a quick extraction during the early morning hours when guard presence was minimal. But their surveillance revealed that the traffickers never reduced their security staffing. The facility was guarded around the clock by at least 8 armed men, with additional personnel stationed at checkpoints along the access roads. Marcus had decided to approach the problem differently. Instead of trying to avoid the guards, they would neutralize them systematically while creating the impression that the attack was coming from a different direction. Kemal would begin by creating explosions and gunfire on the eastern side of the complex while Marcus and Ahmet breached the western wall. The guards would presumably rush toward the apparent threat, leaving the hostage areas less defended. Sarah's role had expanded beyond simple communication support. She would monitor police radio frequencies to provide early warning if local authorities responded to the noise. She would also track the team's progress through the warehouse using blueprints and a GPS system that Marcus had somehow obtained. Movement on the north fence, Sarah reported, spotting 2 guards walking their patrol route. 2 subjects carrying assault rifles, moving west to east. Copy, Marcus replied. We see them. Stand by. Sarah watched through the binoculars as Marcus and Ahmet crept toward their entry point. They moved with the fluid grace of people who had done this type of work many times before. Even from her distant observation post, Sarah could tell they were completely focused and professional. The first explosion came from the eastern side of the complex, exactly as planned. Through the binoculars, Sarah saw guards running toward the sound while shouting into their radios. A second explosion followed 30 seconds later, and she could hear automatic gunfire echoing across the warehouse district. Diversion is active, Kemal reported through the radio. Drawing them away from your position. Copy, Marcus said. Beginning breach now. Sarah switched her binoculars to the western wall where Marcus and Ahmet were working. She couldn't see them clearly through the industrial machinery and storage containers that cluttered the area, but she could track their progress on the GPS display. Team 1 is inside the perimeter, Marcus reported, moving toward Building 2. Building 2 was where their intelligence suggested the hostages were being held. The structure contained a series of small rooms that had apparently been converted into individual cells. Each room had a heavy door with multiple locks, and there were no windows except for high slits near the ceiling. Police radio activity increasing, Sarah warned. Someone called in reports of explosions and gunfire. Response units are being dispatched. Estimated arrival time? Marcus asked. Unknown, but Turkish police typically respond quickly to reports of automatic weapons fire. I'd guess 15 minutes maximum. Copy. We need to move faster. Sarah watched the GPS display as Marcus and Ahmed approached Building 2. The red dots representing their positions moved steadily across the warehouse complex, pausing occasionally when they encountered obstacles or threats. Contact! Ahmed's voice came through the radio, followed by the distinct sound of gunfire. 2 guards at the building entrance. Engaging now. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She had never been involved in anything remotely like this, and the reality of people shooting at Marcus and Ahmed was almost overwhelming. She forced herself to focus on the communications equipment and GPS display. Contacts neutralized, Ahmed reported. Proceeding to building entry. Guard reinforcements moving toward Building 2. Kemal warned from his position on the eastern side. At least 4 subjects. They figured out the diversion. How long can you keep them occupied? Marcus asked. 2 minutes, maybe 3. Then, I need to relocate or they'll surround me. Sarah watched the tactical situation deteriorating in real time. The team had always known this would be a race against time, but she hadn't fully understood how quickly things could go wrong. Marcus and Ahmed were inside the most dangerous part of the complex with armed guards closing in from multiple directions. Building 2 breached, Marcus reported. Beginning search for hostages. Police units are 3 minutes out, Sarah warned. Multiple vehicles approaching from the north and west. Sarah, we need you to monitor the hostage condition, Marcus said. Once we find them, I need to know if anyone requires immediate medical attention. Understood. Sarah had studied everything available about the psychological and physical condition of trafficking victims. Many would be traumatized and disoriented. Some might be injured or sick from poor treatment. A few might be so frightened that they would resist rescue attempts. Hostages located, Ahmed announced. 26 individuals, various conditions. I see Maya Patel. She appears conscious and mobile. Relief flooded through Sarah like a physical sensation. Maya was alive and apparently not severely injured. For the first time in weeks, Sarah allowed herself to believe this nightmare might actually end successfully. Sarah, I need to talk to Maya, Marcus said. She needs to know you're here and that this is a legitimate rescue. Sarah activated her radio microphone. Maya, this is Sarah. Can you hear me? There was a pause, then Maya's voice came through the radio, weak but unmistakably hers. Sarah, how are you here? What's happening? We're getting you out. There are people here to help you, but you need to follow their instructions exactly. Do you understand? I understand. Sarah, there are other people here. Women and children. We can't leave them. We're taking everyone, Sarah assured her. But, Maya, you need to help keep everyone calm. Some of them might be scared of the rescue team. They're speaking Turkish and Kurdish to them, Maya said. Most of the hostages understand at least some Turkish. Good. Maya, are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? I am okay. Scared and exhausted, but okay. Some of the others are in worse condition. Police are 1 minute out, Sarah warned. They need to move now. Beginning extraction, Marcus announced. Sarah, guide us to the exit route with the least police presence. Sarah studied the GPS display and the police radio chatter. Law enforcement units were converging on the warehouse complex from multiple directions, but they seemed to be focusing on the eastern side where Kemal had created his diversions. Take the southern route, Sarah advised. Police concentration is lighter there, and you'll have better cover until you reach the extraction vehicles. Copy. Moving south, Sarah watched the GPS dots representing her friends and the hostages moving slowly through the warehouse complex. Their progress seemed agonizingly slow, but she knew they were probably moving as quickly as safety allowed while managing 26 traumatized people. Kemal, what's your status? Marcus asked. Taking heavy fire from multiple directions, Kemal replied, his voice strained. I can't hold this position much longer. Disengage and move to extraction point 2, Marcus ordered. We'll meet you there. Negative. Too many guards between me and extraction point 2. I'll have to find another way out. Sarah felt a chill of fear. The plan had always included contingencies for team members becoming separated, but the reality was that Kemal might not survive to reach any extraction point. Police are entering the complex, Sarah reported, watching flashing lights through her binoculars. At least 6 vehicles, probably 20 officers. How close to our position? Marcus asked. 200 meters and closing. They're searching building by building. We need to move faster. Sarah watched helplessly as the rescue turned into a desperate race between Marcus's team and the approaching police. If the officers reached the hostages before the team could get them to safety, everyone would likely be arrested. Turkish authorities would have to sort out who was a criminal and who was a victim, a process that could take weeks or months. Worse, the trafficking organization would have time to relocate their operation and disappear. Other hostages at different locations would be moved beyond any possibility of rescue. Contact with police, Ahmed announced. They've spotted us. Moving to defensive positions. Sarah heard gunfire through the radio and through the night air across the warehouse district. She couldn't tell who was shooting at whom, but the sound made her feel sick with anxiety. Maya, are you okay? Sarah called into her radio. We're okay, Maya replied. But, Sarah, some of the women are panicking. They think the police might send them back to their home countries where they'll be arrested or worse. This was a complication Marcus had warned about. Some trafficking victims were in the country illegally and feared deportation more than continued captivity. Others came from places where police couldn't be trusted and might refuse help from any authority figures. Tell them the American embassy will protect them, Sarah said. Tell them they'll be treated as victims, not criminals. I'm trying, but some of them don't speak enough English to understand. Team 1, we have a problem, Marcus announced. Police have blocked our route to extraction point 1. We need an alternative. Sarah studied the map desperately, looking for roads that would allow the team to reach safety while avoiding police checkpoints. The problem was that law enforcement had apparently cordoned off the entire warehouse district. There's a drainage canal about 400 meters south of your position, Sarah said. It runs under the main road and connects to an industrial area outside the police perimeter. Can accommodate 26 people? I don't know, but it might be your only option. Moving toward the drainage canal. Sarah, contact the embassy and tell them we're bringing in 26 trafficking victims who will need immediate protection and medical care. Already done, Sarah replied. She had called the American embassy in Ankara an hour earlier and spoken with the duty officer about the situation. The embassy had agreed to provide assistance, though they had made it clear that they couldn't officially endorse or support Marcus's rescue operation. Kemal, what's your status? Marcus asked again. There was no response. Sarah felt her stomach drop with dread. Kemal might be unable to use his radio because of his tactical situation, or he might be captured or worse. Kemal, respond if able. Marcus tried again. Still nothing. We have to assume Kemal is compromised, Marcus told Ahmet. Continue with extraction. Sarah watched through her binoculars as a group of figures emerged from the warehouse complex and moved toward the drainage canal. Even at this distance, she could see that some of them were having difficulty walking. The hostages had probably been held in cramped conditions for weeks and were weak from poor nutrition and stress. Sarah, we're going to need medical personnel at the extraction point, Marcus said. At least 3 of the hostages need immediate attention. Ambulances are standing by at the hospital, Sarah confirmed. But, Marcus, if you bring them to the hospital, the police will be notified immediately. I know, but some of these people won't survive without medical care. Sarah understood the dilemma. The team's original plan had been to take the hostages to a safe house where a doctor could evaluate them privately before contacting authorities. But if people were seriously injured or sick, delaying treatment could be fatal. "Your call," Sarah said. "Whatever you think is best. We're heading for the hospital. Contact them and let them know to expect multiple trauma victims." Sarah called the hospital and spoke with the emergency department supervisor. She explained that there had been an industrial accident and that multiple victims would be arriving soon. It wasn't technically true, but it would ensure that medical personnel were prepared to provide immediate care. "Police activity is increasing around the hospital," Sarah warned, after monitoring radio frequencies for several minutes. "They might be expecting you to show up there." "Copy. We'll approach from the south and use the emergency entrance. Less security presence there." Sarah packed up her communications equipment and prepared to move to a new position where she could observe the hospital. Her role in the operation was almost complete, but she wanted to be close enough to help if anything went wrong during the final phase. As she drove through the dark streets of Gaziantep, Sarah reflected on everything that had happened over the past several hours. 3 weeks ago, she had been a social worker in Detroit with no experience in international rescue operations. Now she was coordinating communications for a military-style assault on a trafficking facility. The transformation felt surreal, but also necessary. Maya would have done the same thing if their situations were reversed. Best friends didn't abandon each other when things got dangerous. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. She glanced at it while stopped at a traffic light. "Your friend is safe. Meet us at Extraction Point 3 in 20 minutes. Extraction Point 3 was a parking garage near the hospital where Marcus had arranged backup vehicles in case their primary transportation was compromised. Sarah felt a wave of relief that surprised her with its intensity. She hadn't fully realized how terrified she had been that something would go wrong at the last moment. 20 minutes later, Sarah sat in a rental car in the parking garage, watching for any sign of Marcus and the rescued hostages. She had been waiting for about 5 minutes when she heard vehicles approaching from the level below. 2 van-sized trucks emerged from the ramp and parked near her car. Marcus got out of the lead vehicle and walked over to her window. "Everyone's safe," he said simply. "Maya's asking for you." Sarah followed Marcus to the second truck, where Maya was sitting on a bench seat wrapped in a blanket. She looked thinner than Sarah remembered, and there were dark circles under her eyes, but she was unmistakably herself. They hugged for a long time without speaking. Sarah had imagined this moment dozens of times over the past few weeks, but the reality was both more and less emotional than she had expected. Relief was the dominant feeling, but it was mixed with exhaustion and a strange sense of anticlimax. "How did you get here?" Maya asked when they finally separated. "It's a long story," Sarah said, "but the short version is that I couldn't just sit in Michigan while you were suffering somewhere. You risked your life for me. You've been risking your life for strangers for years. It was my turn to take some risks for someone I care about." Marcus approached them with a serious expression. "We need to get everyone to the hospital immediately. Maya appears to be in good condition, but several of the other hostages need medical attention urgently." "What about Kamal?" Sarah asked. "No word yet. Ahmed is going back to look for him once we get the hostages settled." They drove to the hospital in convoy, with Marcus coordinating with hospital security to ensure the victims could be admitted without immediate police involvement. The emergency department staff had prepared a separate wing to accommodate the large number of patients, and social workers were standing by to help with translation and trauma counseling. Sarah stayed with Maya during the medical evaluation, holding her hand while doctors checked for injuries and malnutrition. The physical examination revealed that Maya had lost significant weight and showed signs of stress, but she had not been seriously injured or abused. "I was lucky," Maya explained quietly. "Some of the other women weren't so fortunate. The guard were brutal with anyone who tried to resist or escape." "It's over now," Sarah said. "You're safe. But what about the people who did this? Are they going to be arrested?" Marcus answered from the doorway. "Turkish police have arrested several people at the warehouse complex, but the leaders of the organization weren't there during the raid. They'll probably be back in business at a new location within a few weeks. Maya looked devastated by this news. So, this was all for nothing? Other women will be kidnapped and treated the same way? It wasn't for nothing, Sarah said firmly. 26 people are free tonight because we took action. That's not nothing. Marcus nodded agreement. Sarah's right. We can't save everyone, but we saved the people we could save. That has to be enough. The rest of the night passed in a blur of medical procedures, police interviews, and paperwork. The Turkish authorities were surprisingly cooperative, treating the rescued hostages as victims rather than criminals, and coordinating with the American embassy to arrange protection for Maya and the other foreign nationals. By dawn, most of the immediate crisis had been resolved. Maya and the other hostages were stable and receiving appropriate care. The trafficking facility had been shut down and several arrests had been made. Most importantly, everyone on Marcus's team had survived the operation. Kamal finally made contact around sunrise. He had been trapped in a firefight with police for several hours, but had eventually managed to slip away during the confusion. He was bruised and exhausted, but not seriously injured. Not bad for a night's work, Marcus said as they gathered in a hotel conference room to debrief. Everyone goes home alive, and we accomplished the primary mission. What happens now? Sarah asked. Maya will need a few days of medical observation. Then, the embassy will arrange transportation back to the United States. The other hostages will be processed through appropriate channels based on their citizenship and legal status. And the traffickers? Some will be prosecuted. Others will disappear and set up shop somewhere else. It's an ongoing problem that won't be solved by a single rescue operation. Sarah understood that Marcus was managing her expectations, but she still felt frustrated that the people responsible for Maya's kidnapping might escape justice. At least the victims are free, she said. That's what matters, Marcus agreed. Everything else is beyond our control. 2 hours later, Sarah sat beside Maya's hospital bed, watching her friend sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. The ordeal was finally over, but Sarah knew it would take months or years for Maya to fully process the psychological trauma of her captivity. The experience had changed both of them in ways they were only beginning to understand. Maya had faced her worst fears and survived. Sarah had discovered reserves of courage and determination she hadn't known she possessed. But the most important thing was that they were together again, safe and free. Everything else could be figured out later. Sarah's phone buzzed with another message from her mother, asking for an update. She typed back a simple reply. Maya is safe. We're both coming home soon. It was the first completely good news Sarah had been able to share in weeks. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they both readjusted to normal life after such an extraordinary experience. But tonight it was enough to know that her best friend was alive and safe, sleeping peacefully in a hospital bed instead of a trafficking facility. The nightmare was over, and they had both survived. 6 months after the rescue operation in Turkey, Sarah sat across from Maya in their favorite coffee shop in Detroit, watching her friend struggle to describe what normal life felt like now. Maya had been back in the United States for 5 months, but the adjustment period was proving more difficult than either of them had anticipated. Some days I forget it ever happened, Maya said, stirring sugar into her coffee with mechanical precision. I'll be doing something ordinary like grocery shopping or watching television, and suddenly I remember that 3 months ago I was locked in a concrete room wondering if I would ever see sunlight again. Sarah nodded, understanding more than Maya realized. The rescue operation had changed both of their lives in profound ways that continued to unfold. Sarah had returned to her job at the social services office, but she found herself restless and dissatisfied with the routine challenges of domestic casework after experiencing something so intensely meaningful. The therapist says it's normal, Maya continued. Apparently, trauma doesn't just disappear when the traumatic situation ends. Your brain keeps processing it for months or years afterward. How are the nightmares? Better. I only wake up screaming 2 or 3 times a week now, instead of every night. Maya's attempt at dark humor made Sarah wince. She had been attending therapy sessions with Maya whenever possible, partly for moral support and partly because she was dealing with her own psychological aftermath from the operation. Dr. Rodriguez says you've been having some adjustment issues too, Maya said gently. Want to talk about it? Sarah hesitated. She felt guilty complaining about her problems when Maya had endured actual captivity and trauma. But her therapist had emphasized that everyone involved in the rescue operation would need time to process the experience. It's hard to explain, Sarah said finally. For 3 weeks, I was completely focused on finding you. Every decision, every action, everything I thought about was directed toward that single goal. Now that goal is accomplished, and I don't know what to do with myself. You saved my life. Doesn't that feel meaningful? It does. But it also makes everything else seem less important by comparison. How do I get excited about helping families apply for food stamps when I know there are women being trafficked right now who need rescuing? Maya reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. You can't save everyone, Sarah. Marcus told us that, remember? I know, but I also can't pretend I don't know these things are happening. This conversation was one they had been having in various forms for months. Sarah had become increasingly interested in anti-trafficking work, but the field was small and specialized. Most organizations required international experience and language skills that Sarah lacked. Actually, Maya said, I wanted to talk to you about something related to that. I've been offered a position with an organization called International Rescue Coalition. They focus specifically on human trafficking cases. Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and concern. That sounds perfect for you. But are you ready to go back into that kind of work? Dr. Rodriguez thinks it might actually help with my recovery. Instead of feeling like a helpless victim, I can take action to prevent other people from going through what I experienced. Where would you be working? That's the interesting part. They want me to establish a new program that combines direct victim services with rescue operations. Someone who understands both the trauma side and the operational side. Sarah could see where this conversation was headed, and her heart started beating faster. They also need someone to handle coordination and communication during rescue operations, Maya continued. Someone who understands how these missions work, but isn't necessarily a tactical specialist. Maya, are you asking me to quit my job and become some kind of international rescue coordinator? I'm asking you to consider it. The pay isn't great, but it's meaningful work. And we'd be working together again. Sarah stared at her coffee cup, trying to process this unexpected opportunity. 3 months ago, she had been planning to spend the rest of her career helping families in Detroit navigate social services. Now Maya was offering her a chance to be involved in operations that save people from human trafficking. What kind of training would I need? 6 months of intensive preparation. Communications systems, international law, cultural sensitivity, basic security protocols. It's like going back to school, but focused on practical skills. And after that, we'd be part of a team that responds to trafficking cases worldwide. Sometimes it would involve working with local authorities to coordinate official rescue operations. Sometimes it would involve supporting private contractors like Marcus when governments can't or won't act. Sarah thought about Marcus, who had stayed in touch intermittently over the past 6 months. He was currently working on a case in Southeast Asia and had mentioned that the demand for qualified rescue coordinators far exceeded the supply. What does Dr. Rodriguez think about you going back into dangerous situations? She says it's my choice to make, but she also pointed out that I'm going to be thinking about trafficking and rescue operations whether I'm working in that field or not. At least this way, I can turn those thoughts into constructive action. Sarah understood what Maya meant. She found herself reading news articles about human trafficking cases and wondering if the victims would ever be rescued. She had started following the work of various anti-trafficking organizations and had even made several financial donations. How much time do I have to decide? They need an answer within 2 weeks. The training program starts next month. Where? Washington, D.C. for the first 3 months, then field training in locations that I'm not allowed to discuss until you're actually part of the program. That evening, Sarah called her mother to discuss the opportunity. As expected, her mother's first reaction was horror at the idea of Sarah voluntarily entering dangerous situations around the world. Sarah, You just spent months terrified that something terrible would happen to you in Turkey. Now you want to make that your career. Mom, the work Maya and I would be doing isn't the same as what Marcus does. We wouldn't be carrying weapons or breaking into buildings. We'd be providing support services and coordination. But you'd still be in dangerous places dealing with dangerous people. Sometimes. But we'd also be helping to save people who have no one else to help them. Her mother was quiet for a long time before responding. Your father always said you inherited his sense of justice. He would be proud of what you did for Maya. But he would also want you to be smart about managing risks. These trafficking organizations are apparently very dangerous. That's exactly why people like Maya and me are needed. Someone has to be willing to take some risks to help the victims. Sarah spent the next week researching International Rescue Coalition and reading everything she could find about anti-trafficking work. The organization had an excellent reputation and worked closely with government agencies around the world. Their rescue operations had a high success rate and a strong safety record. She also spoke with Marcus during one of his rare phone calls from Asia. His perspective was characteristically direct. Sarah, you did good work in Turkey. You stayed calm under pressure and made smart decisions when everything was falling apart. Those are exactly the skills needed for this type of coordination work. But I had no idea what I was doing. I was basically making it up as I went along. That's what this job is most of the time. No two situations are identical, so you can't just follow a checklist. You have to think on your feet and adapt to circumstances. Is it worth the risk? That depends on what you consider meaningful. If you want a safe, predictable career, then no. But if you want to do something that actually matters, then yes. Marcus's endorsement carried significant weight with Sarah. He had no reason to encourage her unless he genuinely believed she would be effective in this type of work. 2 days before her deadline to respond to International Rescue Coalition, Sarah made her decision during a particularly frustrating day at the social services office. She had spent 8 hours helping families navigate bureaucratic processes that seemed designed to discourage people from getting assistance they desperately needed. The work was important, but it was also reactive rather than proactive. Sarah was helping people deal with problems that had already developed rather than preventing those problems from occurring in the first place. Trafficking rescue work would be different. It would involve preventing ongoing crimes and saving people from situations that could only get worse over time. That evening, Sarah called Maya with her answer. I'm in. Really? You're sure? I'm sure. When do we start? Next Monday. We'll need to relocate to DC for the training program. What do I need to bring? Just clothes and personal items. Everything else will be provided. Maya, what if we're not good at this? What if we fail during an actual operation? Then, we'll have tried our best to help people who needed help. That's more than most people can say. Sarah gave her supervisor 2 weeks' notice and began the process of transferring her caseload to other social workers. Margaret Chun was disappointed, but not surprised by Sarah's decision. I knew you wouldn't be satisfied with routine casework after what you experienced in Turkey, Margaret said during their final meeting. Just promise me you'll be careful. Detroit Social Services can replace good workers, but Maya can't replace her best friend. I'll be careful, Sarah promised. But I also can't ignore what I've learned about what's happening to people around the world. Sarah's last day at the social services office was bittersweet. She had genuinely enjoyed helping families in Detroit, and she would miss working with colleagues who had become friends over the years. But she also felt excited about the new challenges ahead. The training program at International Rescue Coalition was more intensive than Sarah had expected. The first month covered basic security protocols, international law, cultural sensitivity, and communication systems. The second month focused on crisis management, trauma psychology, and coordination techniques. The third month involved practical exercises that simulated actual rescue operations. Sarah learned to manage communications during high-stress situations, coordinate with multiple agencies simultaneously, and make rapid decisions based on incomplete information. Maya was training in parallel programs that focused more heavily on direct victim services and trauma counseling. They saw each other occasionally during breaks, and shared experiences during their few free hours. "This is harder than social work school," Sarah said during one of their evening conversations. "But it's also more engaging." The instructors keep emphasizing that most rescue operations fail because of poor coordination rather than tactical problems, Maya replied. "Apparently, good communication and planning are more important than fancy equipment." That makes sense. In Turkey, everything depended on Marcus and his team knowing exactly where each other were and what everyone else was doing. Both women excelled in their respective training programs. Sarah discovered that her background in social services had prepared her well for coordination work, since both fields required managing complex situations involving multiple people with different needs and priorities. Maya found that her experience as a trafficking victim gave her insights into trauma psychology that complemented her formal training. She could anticipate how other victims might react to rescue attempts and help prepare teams for those responses. At the end of 3 months, both women graduated from their programs and received their first assignment, providing support services for a rescue operation in Colombia involving women trafficked for Venezuela. The mission would be led by a team of former military contractors working with Colombian authorities to raid several locations simultaneously. Sarah and Maya would coordinate communications and victim services from a command center in Bogotá. "Are you nervous?" Maya asked as they prepared to fly to South America. "Terrified," Sarah admitted, "but also excited. 6 months ago, I never imagined I would be doing something like this. 6 months ago, I was locked in a room in Turkey wondering if I would ever see you again. Now we're going to help rescue other people from similar situations. Do you think we can actually make a difference?" "I know we can. We already have." The flight to Colombia marked the beginning of Sarah's new career in international rescue operations. She had no idea what specific challenges lay ahead, but she was confident that the work would be meaningful and important. More importantly, she would be working alongside her best friend, using the skills they had both developed during the most difficult period of their lives. The trauma of Maya's kidnapping had been transformed into motivation to help others in similar situations. As their plane descended toward Bogotá, Sarah reflected on the strange path that had brought them to this point. A year ago, she had been a social worker in Detroit with no international experience. Maya had been an aid worker focused on refugee assistance. Neither of them had any connection to anti-trafficking work. Now they were both specialists in rescue operations, preparing to coordinate a mission that could save dozens of women from forced prostitution. The transformation felt surreal, but it also felt right. "Whatever happens in Colombia," Sarah told Maya as they collected their luggage, "I'm glad we're doing this together." "Me too. No matter how dangerous it gets, at least we'll face it as a team." The taxi driver who picked them up at the airport spoke limited English, but he understood enough to take them to the hotel where International Rescue Coalition had arranged their accommodations. During the ride through Bogotá's crowded streets, Sarah noticed several young women who looked like they might be prostitutes working under circumstances that weren't entirely voluntary. The sight reminded her why this work was necessary. Somewhere in this city, women who had been promised legitimate jobs in Colombia were being forced to sell their bodies to pay off fictitious debts to their traffickers. Some of those